But that's Friday night. And then Saturday we talked about 5 tools that were needed in our lives, and we brought different horses out, and we illustrated concepts of grace. You know, there is not a relationship in our lives and from the scriptures that can't be illustrated with a horse. Isn't that an amazing thing? Why? Because God is a relational God, and everything he does works on dynamics like that. And so when we get them, we're just simply amplifying what he does. So this morning, I want to continue that a little bit. You don't have to have had the background of the weekend. But I'm going to talk to you about hate. I came to church to learn that? I thought I learned that at the bar. Okay. Because unless you learn how to hate, you will never learn how to love. In fact, as the horse goes along, the horse loves all the wrong things. The horse loves feed and laziness and getting out of work and never being harnessed. And he hates being caught, being saddled, being bridled, made to work. Oh, now I get it. Because I love the things that I should hate and hate the things that I should love. And so there's this paradigm in our life where you and I have to learn how to hate. And God says the same thing. He says there are 6 things that I hate. 7 even that are an abomination. Proverbs chapter 6. And he says, I hate haughty eyes. And you know, a horse, when they're afraid, they raise their head. And you lift that. Now, we don't always get the chance to put our ears back like that. Our ears don't move like a good mule, you know. Although some of you, I think you can do that. And but our heads raised. But more than that, our headship, we take headship back. And raising our head is taking authority, taking self-authority. So the horse raises his head. He always raises his head when he's afraid or when he's upset or he's concerned about the future. The only time the horse lowers his head is when he's completely at trust with his trainer, or he's grazing, or he's ready to lay down. So he's at peace with things like that. The problem with that is Jesus illustrates this in his own life in Matthew chapter 11 when he says, Come unto me, all ye that are weary and heavy laden, and take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly, and you shall find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And here's the deal. You know, when a horse raises his head, a horse has 2 sets of 2 legs, front leg, rear leg. And I think if I just learned this weekend that P.T. Barnum used to be headquartered in Florida. Is that correct? Yeah, and of course they just quit all that. But the P.T. Barnum is a lot like the Golden Gate Bridge of San Francisco. It's a suspension bridge, and they always lived in a suspension tent. And of course, a circus isn't a circus without a tent. It just wouldn't work, would it? Well, the thing that held the tent up wasn't just the 2 main pillars. It was the cord that ran from the tent pegs up across, down across one, across the other, and the tent pegs. So, you know, if you're ever camping with your friends, the greatest trick was to just go pull the tent pegs out. That was fun, wasn't it? Now I've given some evil ideas, and some of you don't need any ideas, I see. Well, the horse has the same thing. And he has this ligament that runs from the pole of his head, and it runs across his shoulder blades, and then it comes across his back, which is a suspension set of vertebrae, and then his hips take another support mechanism, and then he has this tail, this sacral part. So what happens, gang, when the horse raises his head? What happens to the heavy load, the saddle, and the rider that's on his back? Does the load get heavier or lighter? Heavier. Because it's a slack back and the burden goes all down. But when a horse lowers his head and gives others headship, when he doesn't need to see tomorrow, when he doesn't need to be in control, he actually tightens this ligament and it thrusts the weight upward and makes his burden light. And that is the exact illustration that Jesus used in Matthew chapter 11, because it was an agricultural society. Now, Jesus said, I hate an arrogant look, haughty eyes. I hate a mouth that lies or a lying tongue. When a horse usually raises his head and a rider is giving him direction with a bit in his mouth, usually he opens his mouth and says, It's called bit evasion. And the horse is complaining because he doesn't want to be controlled, he doesn't want to be steered with his mouth, and he opens his mouth because he's fighting direction. Goodness, that's a terrible mirror, isn't it? Our mouths open. I don't want to do that. Come on, what are they doing? Never mind. Anyhow, so God says, I hate that. Because you see, you don't really want to control a horse's mouth. You want to control his feet. But if they're not connected, you're in trouble. And then he says, I hate hands that shed innocent blood. He gets right down through this list, and I think he's been looking in my barn, looking at my horses. And when a horse sheds innocent blood, he can strike with his front feet, rear, or paw, and they can be very powerful and very lethal, especially if you're dealing with a feral animal like a wild Mustang, and they can just kill you with a swipe. Or they can be lethal with their hind end, and they can combat you with two hind legs. And I was in Colorado one time working in a program, and I stepped into the round pen, and the horse just started running backwards, kicking with both hind legs. And I'm like, I'm in trouble. I said, throw me a whip. So they throw me one this long. I said, you idiots, give me a real whip. And but the horse had to start moving forward and so forth. I just needed to get the horse to move. But God hates, and I hate horses that shed my innocent blood. Then he says, I hate those who have devised wicked plans. A horse always has wicked plans. Now, few horses set out to kill you. Now, that becomes later on in the life where a horse is threatened or he's cornered or he's been trained and beat or whatever, where he becomes lethal and dangerous or he's had psychotic damage or whatever. But most horses aren't out. They're not aggressors. And so they don't devise plans. They just kill you because they're selfish. They're 1,200 pounds of dynamo and selfishness, and they don't intend to kill you, but if they run off with you, if you fall from a horse at a gallop, if you or the horse rears and falls back on you, that horse, and he's only doing it because he's saving himself. You see, most of us don't intend to hurt other people. We just don't even think about other people. A young seminary student came home from classes one day, and the family was doing very poorly, and there was a can of soup on the counter, and he took the can and he ate it. And his wife came down and she says, that's it, I'm out of here. You see, it was the only can of soup left in the house. And it wasn't that he ate soup, it's that he never even thought of somebody else. We don't need to go to selfish school, do we? We don't even need to send our school kids there, because you see, 90% of our thoughts are consumed with ourselves. A heart that devises wicked plans is a heart that doesn't think of God's plans. A heart that doesn't think about others' needs. It simply is consumed with how I look, how I get along, and goodness knows, unless we have some outside challenge, we will always be consumed with ourselves. So we don't even have to do evil like those people out there to be useless. We just have to be unharnessed to do good. And then, of course, he says, I hate those whose feet run rapidly to evil. Boy, there's some people that you just, no sooner do they get bad news than they're running off with it. And you kind of want to stop them. Well, a horse runs when he's afraid, when he's upset. He always runs back to the herd. He always runs back to the barn. And if you've ever been on a horse that's been barn sour, anybody know what that term means? It means he loves the barn rather than the ride that you're on. And if he gives half a chance, he'll start going back to the barn. He'll start picking up speed. And you just hope that you close the bottom door and not just the top one. Or you're going to have one major headache. Horse is barn sour because he always goes back to his old friends, always goes back to his own ways, always goes back to familiar territory, runs back to the herd. I hate that. I hate those a false witness who speaks lies. A false witness is a horse whose saddle and bridle has been ridden by any number of people for a lot of years, but cross him once. And though he professes to be broke, though he professes to be harnessed, though he professes to be a servant, it's just like being a servant. I don't mind being a servant, I just hate being treated like one. You see, when a horse is treated as though he's a servant and he's crossed or challenged to do something he doesn't want to do, or go to a place to cross a stream, or to go away from the barn, or to carry a burden, or to go a little bit further, suddenly you find that he's not as broke as he pretends to be broke. And suddenly the reactions of rearing or turning around or being jigging and all those anxieties come up in his life, and suddenly you find yourself at risk because you assigned your life to the welfare of somebody who said they're broke, but they aren't. Many a person has called themselves Christian, Christ in me, referred to him as Lord of their life. Even Peter said, "Not so, Lord." That's the greatest contradiction of Scripture. You can't say, "Not so, Lord." And many a horse says, "Lord, not so." And you find that out after you get going, after the stream gets going, and things come out of our life that aren't pleasant. Well, Scripture refers to it often as a carnal life, but it's a life who professes one thing and can't deliver the goods under the most difficult of times. And then he says, there's another thing I hate, those who spread strife among the brethren. If you've ever been in a group of riders on horses on a public fairway or trail ride or whatever the case may be, if you have one bad horse or one immature rider, that horse will run through the herd, he'll bump into other horses, he'll kick at other horses, he'll bite other horses, he'll cause other horses to react, and it's like having one driver out there who's reckless, threatens the life and the welfare of everybody else on the road. Spreading strife is so stinking easy, isn't it? Just to take up an offense for yourself and then get someone else to take up an offense for you. Wow, that's just so, and all in the name of love, all in the name of needing help, and instead of really getting the real substance and the truth we need. God said, I hate those things. They destroy my people. They destroy your generations. They destroy my following. They dishonor me. I hate those things. 7. The fear of the Lord is to hate pride, arrogance, and the froward mouth, it says. Now, we often instead hate ourselves rather than hate the thing that we do. And we don't often separate our worth. And Satan loves it if we hate ourselves. But he's in trouble if we learn to hate the things and the choices and the consequences of those things. So he goes on, he says, now, and if you follow Scripture, there are a number of times, it's 7. In fact, when a perverse man says sweet things, he says, do not believe them because there are 7 abominations in his heart. Did you not notice that when he refers to Mary of Magdalene, who came from the city of Magdala, and when she comes to the cross, this was the Mary from whom Jesus cast out 7 demons? Why? Because they're the reflection of a root cause. They're a reflection of a need that's there. And I want to take you to 2 Peter chapter 1 when it says, now supplying all diligence. In other words, we're in this wholehearted. Now that you're in this wholehearted, I want you to supply or add to your faith a thing called virtue. And to virtue add knowledge. And to knowledge add self-control. And to self-control perseverance. And to perseverance godliness. And to godliness brotherly kindness. And that will result in love. If these 7 ingredients in the pie, you're going to have a great pie. And they need to be added to and grow thin. But the problem is this, is that you and I have reactions. And when somebody frightens you, what do? We pull away from anything that fears. Because we don't need to be taught to protect ourselves. We are automatically self-protective. When somebody comes into your life and they bring light into your life, or they expose or ask you about your motive, they question your motive. Of course, you say, you're just judging me, get out of my life. But we all withdraw. We hide our motives. We don't want our motives to be examined. No one has the right to know what's in our heart.